International News Edition. His Majesty the King and the Palestinian President discussed during a telephone conversation the latest developments in the region, especially efforts to achieve peace between the Palestinians and Israelis based on the two-state solution. The Prime Minister checks on preparations that have been taken by the departments of the Civil Defense and Public Security as well as the Greater Amman municipality to deal with the prevailing weather conditions in the kingdom. And in Seoul, Syrian and South Korean officials meet to discuss the economic recovery and development of Syria. Good evening and very warm welcome to the news. His Majesty the King and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas discussed the latest developments in the region, especially efforts to achieve peace. The King and Abbas discussed during the telephone conversation ways to revive peace negotiations leading to the establishment of an independent Palestinian state on Palestinian national soil based on the two-state solution. His Majesty stressed Jordan's full support to efforts that aim at achieving peace that fulfills aspirations of the Palestinian people, establishing an independent and viable state on the 1967 border. The two leaders stressed their support to U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry's efforts to bring views of Palestinians and Israelis closer in the negotiations that address all final status issues. Abbas congratulated His Majesty over Jordan's recent election as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour checked on preparations that have been taken by the departments of the Civil Defense and Public Security as well as the Greater Amman municipality to deal with the prevailing weather conditions. During a visit to Civil Defense Department, accompanied by the Interior Minister, Mansour met with the CDD Director Lieutenant General Talal Al-Kofahi and praised efforts of the department to provide needed services to citizens with the use of modern equipment. Lieutenant General Al-Kofahi presented a briefing on the action plan adopted by the department to deal with the weather conditions as well as the various incidents it dealt with. Mansour also visited the Public Security Department where he hailed efforts of the security personnel in providing services to citizens and opening roads that have been closed by snowfall. The Prime Minister also checked on services offered by the Greater Amman municipality during a visit to the emergency center in Tlaa Ali district in Amman, where he also met with the mayor of Amman, Aqal Biltaji. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry headed back to the Middle East a week after his previous visit ended with Palestinian dissatisfaction over U.S. security ideas for an elusive land for peace deal with Israel. Kerry planned separate meetings with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Kerry said he presented Israel and the Palestinians last week with some thoughts on security arrangements in any future accord. A Palestinian source said that the U.S. security proposal outlined an Israeli military presence in the Jordan Valley for 10 years. The Palestinians, who seek a state in the West Bank and Gaza with East Jerusalem as its capital, have long rejected any interim agreement. A meeting focused on the economic recovery and development of Syria got underway in South Korea. Syrian interim Prime Minister Ahmed Toome referred to a Marshall Plan for Syria, a reference to the big US-backed aid program that helped Western Europe recover after World War II. The meeting is co-hosted by the United Arab Emirates, Germany and South Korea and led by members from the Friends of Syria, the core of which is mainly Western and Gulf Arab countries and Turkey. South Korea's foreign minister outlined expected agenda for discussions.
Today's meeting, 5 platforms, including agriculture, food security, and energy, will be discussed, and the overarching goal of achieving Syria's economic recovery and development. I'd like to share with you some of my thoughts on the basic principles and approaches for the discussions on these themes.
A Syrian National Coalition spokesman said the suspension of aid from the US and Britain to Syria was temporary and that talks were underway to resolve the conflict. The United States and Britain suspended non-lethal aid to northern Syria yesterday after Islamist fighters seized Western-backed rebel weapons warehouses. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the Islamic Front seized anti-aircraft and anti-tank weapons from the Supreme Military Council arms stores in Bab al-Hawa on the border with Turkey. The White House said the United States was concerned about the reports. A U.S. embassy spokesman in Ankara said the situation was being investigated. He added that American aid, including trucks, ambulances and ready meals, reached Syria overland through Turkey.
Until that situation is resolved, both the U.S. and the U.K. have decided to suspend delivering any aid to the warehouses, and this is very understandable. Those countries and other countries as well will only deal with the SMC represented by General Salim Idris as well. So we're waiting for that situation to be resolved. There are talks taking place right now, and there is lots of strategy and planning that's taking place in order for us to prevent the situation from taking place, from happening again in the future.
And over to Egypt, where Egyptian riot police fired tear gas and water cannon to disperse hundreds of pro-Islamist protesters demonstrating near the headquarters of the Ministry of Defense in the capital, Cairo. Students supporting Morsi have been staging daily protests for months inside and outside their universities. Earlier, the Cairo Criminal Court withdrew again from the trial of Muslim Brotherhood chief Mohammed Badia and his two deputies, Khairat al-Shatar and Rashad Bayoumi, for allegedly killing protesters in July, citing disorder in the courtroom. They are accused of killing and inciting violence against protesters surrounding the Brotherhood's headquarters in the Muqattam district of Cairo during the June 30th protests. Mustafa Salama, the presiding judge, said he decided to transfer the case to another court for trial. Salama said the defendants will remain in detention before the next trial scheduled on Friday, 11th, 2014. The Obama administration continued its appeal to Congress to hold off on imposing more sanctions on Iran. Officials told lawmakers new sanctions could jeopardize delicate negotiations toward an agreement with Tehran to curb its nuclear program following the controversial deal reached with the Islamic Republic last month. It is the first such enforcement action since the United States and other nations reached a first-step agreement with Iran in Geneva last month. The Obama administration hopes that the agreement, renewable for a further 6 months by mutual consent, will provide time to negotiate a final deal with the Iranians within a year. President Vladimir Putin warned the West not to underestimate Russia's military might, but cast his country as a force for good or for moral good and a bastion for traditional values. In an annual address to lawmakers and officials in the Kremlin, Putin praised Russian foreign policy for preventing military intervention in Syria.
We managed to avoid, at least for now, foreign military intervention into the Syrian matters and spreading the waves of this conflict far beyond that region. Russia made a very substantial contribution to this process. We acted with confidence and prudence. Not once have we put in danger our own interests and security or global stability. I think this is exactly how a mature and responsible nation should act.
The Russian president spoke about a political crisis in Ukraine and expressed hope that the Ukrainian government and opposition would find a political solution to their country's crisis. The Duke and Duchess of Cambridge attended the screening of Sir David Attenborough's Natural History Museum Live 3D in London. The royals attended a reception before the screening where they met with Attenborough, the firm's producers and other attendees, after which the film was screened. The 90-minute film set in the museum uses 3D technology to illustrate how many of the ancient animals on display once wandered the earth. Chelsea topped Group E after their 1-0 home victory over Steaua Bucharest. Bemba Ba scored the 11th minute winner, and while the match will not live long in the memory, at least Chelsea avoided any defensive hiccups after conceding 6 times in their previous 2 domestic matches. As group winners, Chelsea go into Monday's draw without the fear of playing Real Madrid, Barcelona or Bayern Munich, but Mourinho, bidding to win the trophy for a 3rd time, said there was still danger lurking. Steaua Bucharest's European campaign was brought to a close as the Romanian team recorded their 3rd defeat in 6 matches.
Consider că am avut 2-3 șanse foarte mari de a reuși să egalăm scorul. Am primit din nou un gol dintr-o lovitură liberă, dar în
We stay with the Champions League and the same group. Schalke powered into the knockout stage with a 2-0 win over Basel. The Germans, who moved into the last 16 for the 2nd consecutive season, took a deserved lead in the 51st minute through Daxler after dominating from the start and needing victory to advance from the group. They were lucky to have had their 2nd goal count with at least 4 Schalke players clearly in offside position when Matip slotted in from close range to seal the win and relieve some of the pressure on coach Jens Keller. The win moved Schalke, who have dropped down to 6th in the Bundesliga, above their Swiss rivals into 2nd place, with Chelsea securing top spot in the group. Over to the weather forecast. Heavy rain and snowfall is expected to continue tonight as a new cold front will affect the country with temperatures below the freezing point in most parts of the kingdom. Frost formation is also forecast in most regions in the late night and early morning hours. Winds will be westerly brisk to gusty at times. Tomorrow snowfall will hit regions 700 meters above sea level with brisk and gusty westerly winds. The weatherman warns of poor visibility due to fog, snow and heavy downpours. Motorists are advised to take extra caution on the roads, and people should also stay away from low-lying areas due to flash floods. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To close, here is a reminder of our top stories. His Majesty the King and the Palestinian President discussed during a telephone conversation the latest developments in the region, especially efforts to achieve peace between Palestinians and Israelis based on the two-state solution. The Prime Minister checks on preparations that have been taken by the Departments of the Civil Defense and Public Security, as well as the Greater Amman municipality, to deal with the prevailing weather conditions in the kingdom. And in Seoul, Syrian and South Korean officials meet to discuss the economic recovery and development of Syria. And that's the end of tonight's news. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.